Good morning. I wanted to show you today a few things that I have added, and I want to point out as well that I am trying YouTube today to make the video because I realized TechSmith Relay does not work on the app, which makes me really angry. I might try a TechSmith Fuse recording tomorrow on the Blackboard app because maybe I can get that to work. But I try to make everything that we do available to you on your phone. Obviously, I hope that you will use a computer to write your paper and not your thumbs. But I know somebody who wrote her dissertation on her Blackberry with her thumbs, so I can't judge. Anyway, for today's work for Wednesday, we're beginning the novel Of One Blood by Pauline Hopkins, who was born in the late 18th century, or sorry, the late she was born in the late 1800s in Maine, lived in Boston, and was a very well, she was a singer, I should say. She had a singing career, then became a journalist and a fiction writer, and was a very unusual woman for her time period. She died in 1916. She was not, we don't know for sure. I think she may have attended Fisk University, but she was pretty amazing figure. So we are looking at her novel today and for the rest of the week, which is called Of One Blood, which she published serially, meaning week by week, in installments in a magazine she edited known as the Colored American magazine. And I'm opening the PDF right now. So here is one of the front pages of the magazine. They featured photography and pictures of prominent African American men and women from the time period. And here is a little inscription of Phyllis Wheatley, and here is Frederick Douglass, just kind of as a foremother and forefather. And beginning right here, we see the first chapter of One Blood, which is about this man, Ruel Briggs, who has a secretive past but is brilliant and is becoming a doctor at Harvard University. So I selected this particular novel because it has so many references to the biblical and the mythical. And one of the things that I asked you to read for today is also this article about the use of the classics in African American women's writing in particular. So you have to scroll up to page 13 or so because there are two articles here. One is from a book by a gentleman named Eddie Glaude, who you should follow on Twitter because he says really clever stuff. And then we have this article from another book about African American women in the classics. So this is the first chapter, just the historical overview. Talks about the importance of the Persephone and Demeter myth. To a certain extent, Persephone and Demeter, the lost child, figures into Of One Blood because we find out at the very end of the story that there is a conjure woman called Aunt Hannah, who is the first generation of women who are abused by the Livingston family. And then her daughter Mira, who has mystical capabilities and returns from beyond the veil, shall we say. And then Dianthe, who is the third generation. But one of the, so this is the segment about the Persephone and Demeter story, about losing the flower plucked from the earth, shall we say. Dianthe is actually the name of a kind of flower, too. A woman stolen away and raped, and her mother trying to save her. So this Persephone and Demeter story is applicable to Of One Blood in a very loose format as well. There's also a passage here where the, and I'm looking for it, where John Calhoun, who was a South Carolina senator in the 1800s, makes a comment that when he meets an African American who is able to read and write in Greek, he will believe that blacks might be equal. He said that believing that African Americans did not have the capacity to ever learn Greek or Latin, but after he said that, many African American intellectuals, W.B. Du Bois and Pauline Hopkins, really went to great lengths to demonstrate their knowledge of the classics. So this talks about Jason and the Argonauts, about Medea, and about other classical influences. So that is what the quiz for today is about, and I'm asking you also to start reading the novel Of One Blood. Now, these things are also important because I have put here the directions for the first paper. So if you click on the name of the assignment, you can see the assignment, some brief directions here, the rubric, and where is the copy? Oh, the assignment text is before I clicked. Anyway, here's the rubric. Basically, I want you to read Of One Blood. I want you to look at the other resources I've included that speak to Of One Blood, and I want you to talk about something that interests you, about the idea of the veil, about the idea of One Blood, about Mira and Dianthe and Aunt Hannah, perhaps, and the Persephone and Demeter story, about Ruel as a hero. I don't have an idea in my head of what your paper will be. I really want to see the connections that you make and how you apply the mythical and sacred story, mythical or sacred story, to this somewhat bizarre but I think very fascinating Black nationalist novel. So keep in mind for your thesis, it's not going to be just one sentence. It's going to be where you talk about the relationship between what Pauline Hopkins is doing and something from the biblical references or something from the mythical references, and where you start to figure, why is Pauline Hopkins doing this? What is she trying to prove? How is she trying to inspire African Americans in the early 1900s and help people get beyond the kind of limitations that face African Americans in this historical moment? So that's what I call the so what question. I want you to use quotes with signal phrases. I want you to make sure there's topic sentences for all of your paragraphs, and try to write in the first person with active verbs, not passive voice, and then you will do very well. So that is just something to think about as you're reading Of One Blood. You might think of examples for the paper that I didn't think of, and that's great because I love surprises. So, another quick thing I want to mention is that in the discussion board, I love your introductions. I love how you are talking with each other and having a little fun. To begin our thinking for the paper, kind of drafting and brainstorming ideas, I have this discussion post where you think about the idea of the goddess or the woman in myth or in the Bible, and perhaps apply that a little bit to what happens with Pauline Hopkins trying to create strong Black women characters in her novel. So there's a lot of kind of prompt here in the discussion post, but really you can write about whatever you want to from the novel, whatever strikes you, inspires you, whatever seems interesting to you. It's really more of a brainstorming kind of discussion. And please read each other's ideas because I think you'll be inspired by one another as usual. So this is much longer than I usually promise they will be. And I hope you have a great day. And as always, let me know if you have questions.